People of the Purple Butterfly here, otherwise known as People7 on Twitter and YouTube, People elsewhere on the internet, and my blog is located at purplebutterfly-people.blogspot.com. And these are index cards. I've come to share with you a helpful hint that I do to all my favorite and most commonly used patterns. You ever notice when you get a pattern off of the internet, or you have a favorite from a book, or one you designed yourself and you typed it in a notepad and emailed it to yourself so you could put it on your phone, that when you're actually working these patterns, you can't really knit from your phone. The screen will keep going dark, or it'll go to sleep, or whatever. But in the meantime, hey, let me get that back, and you're using up your battery little bit by little bit. Then when you really need to see what's on a particular row, especially when you're working with multiples on several rows, now the battery's dead. What to do? Well, I take my patterns, and like this one, I always see how many rows it is. Like the dragon skin is a multiple 26 and 12 rows. So that means I need one card just for notes, one card just plain, and one card for every row. And on each row, in ink, I'll write dragon skin M26, which tells me it's a multiple 26. This is my note card. It says loosely and evenly cast on desired border and place a marker. Then cast on multiple 26, in other words, however many stitches you're going to put in there. Then place marker to finish the border for the other edge. Okay. Then we have dragon skin, multiple 26, row 1 and all wrong side rows. Dragon skin, multiple 26, row 2. I write all those out in ink. Then I use a pencil to write the actual pattern. That way, because we know with multiples and SSKs and knit two togs and M1s and all that, it's real easy to look at it, write down the wrong thing, and if it's in ink, now you got scribbles and all that. If it's in pencil, you can erase that, do your test pattern. If it's right, then go over those in ink so that way it's indeed permanent. Then what I do, little sneaky thing, I take a size 3 or a size 4 needle. I put my thumb and my finger right nearly at the corner, and I mush that through and slide it through. I use that to line up to another card, corner to corner, etc., etc. And now I'm going to use that same hole I just made to make another hole. Ta-da. So that way, by the time you get all the cards for every row of your pattern, you have a hole in the exact same spot. That's like the little waste yarn that came from, when I cast on the blanket. That's going to be what goes through to hold these cards together. So then you can flip, flip, flip as you go to each individual row of the pattern. I also put 2 or 3 blank cards that just say dragon skin, multiple 26, behind the 12. So like say for instance I had 12 rows, which would be row 1 and 2, row 1 and all wrong side rows, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. So that means I have only 7 cards, but it's 12 rows. I'll go ahead and put 5 more cards attached to that just for notations, what I noticed about working with the pattern, what was the best yarn to use, a little tip on needle sizes, so forth, so on. When I did the champagne lace, which is a pattern I developed, that ended up being 32 rows, and which is actually less than I thought, and that pattern was stuck in my brain for a long time. It's like I kept dreaming this pattern, but I couldn't bring it to fruition. Well, that's how I got it out of my head. It's like, well, row 1 is going to be like this, and I tested it. And row 2 is going to be like this. They end up being 32 separate rows. That's a lot of index cards with a little teeny string holding it. So after I got the pattern tested and it worked out well and everything, I bought a little spiral flip book for like notes with a wire spiral, and it had a hard cover and a hard back. And then I, opened it up. Row 1 is this. Row 2 is that. So forth and so on. So that way, and the little sheets that were left over, I put a couple of mini patterns in there, put some notes in there. That's for my own personal education. Okay, when you're dealing with patterns like the top might have a ruffle on a pair of socks, and the cuff might have a mistake rib, and the instep might have a cable pattern, and the heel might have this, and of course the bottom's plain because you don't want to be walking on all that. That might be three different patterns, especially like Christmas time when you're doing gifts, or for heirloom baby blanket where you're working with 7 or 8 different panels, but it's all gonna make one blanket, and here's the center block, so forth, so on. Well, if you're writing down everything on these flip cards, and you got heirloom baby blanket panel one, and then all the subsequent cards for those rows, say panel one, panel two, panel three, row one, and you stack them all up, now you have a flip book that tells you exactly what to do, when to do it, so forth and so on. So that way, after you make this heirloom creation, you can now make another one. Might be a different color. Might be this panel is pink and that one's blue and this one's white and. And then here's an older child, but they want a blanket like it, so this one's yellow and this one's primary color red, primary color blue. Here's some green and some orange. You know, that helps you be able to recreate something, but not necessarily use the same colors. Especially if you're making little notations on the best needle size, what was the best yarn used. Like when you work on baby yarn, I actually have on one of my pattern cards, make a knot on this pompadour yarn at the end, so that way when you're working with it, it doesn't unravel. Because pompadour yarn has that silky white thread through it. If you do not make a knot at the end of that, it will frazzle on you. And then if that frazzle is allowed to continue, it'll go up your work. But there's a knot there. Do that with microfiber yarn too. Microfiber yarn with like 10 strands that make up the one skein of yarn, that stuff will unravel on you in a heartbeat. And while you're working on it, if you didn't knot the end, then you got these frays all through your work. Put a knot at the end of that, so that way when you smooth it and do your tension while you're knitting, it stays congruent and even, and the tension stays taut while you're working on it. So notations like that you can put on these cards. The pattern you can put on the cards. And with this being an index card, this fits in a pocket. It fits in a purse. It fits in a project bag. It's, like this is it. So it makes it nice and portable for projects. And then when you come home, I have a little container like this, about that big, a little dome lid. It's made for 3.5 index cards that are used for recipes. Well, my recipes are all knitting. I could cook up a sweater, I could cook up a blanket, so forth, so on. I'm using knit needles as my utensils. I'm using yarn as the meat. But nobody said a recipe box had to be used just for recipes. If your project is soap making and you had different varieties of soaps and shampoos and so forth, so on, this one I use calendula wax, and that one I use grapeseed oil, and that one I use lemongrass, so forth, so on. Well, put your recipes on this. Do it in step by step. That way, when you make one batch that comes out perfect, you can now make 2 batches, 4 batches, 20 batches, 1,000, however. That's just my helpful hint for today. I do this for, well, I wouldn't say every knitting pattern because some of the stuff is still up here and never ended up written down because, like, your 2 pattern lace, like knit a whole row of knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, and then foundation row across and repeat. You don't got to write that down. That's going to be up there forever if you've done it once. But for stuff that has 10 rows, 30 rows, so forth, so on, it's just a helpful way to keep your knitting portable without wearing down your battery. So this has been People7 on Twitter and YouTube, People elsewhere on the internet. Don't forget to check out my blog at purplebutterfly-people.blogspot.com. And don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and stay blessed. Bye now.